having worked in the West and having looked into the health systems in the UK and Canada, I always had this thought that there is something which we are lacking in the Indian health system. And then when I got associated with Srimati Kavita Garu, her inspiration, her motivation, and her passion to help improve the health system, to provide better health to the society. And then I got involved with Telangana Jagruthi, and with that we have been doing a lot of health initiatives wherein we are trying to provide basic health facilities, improving the infrastructure, doing a lot of awareness programs for adolescents, improving on the maternal health, child health. These are just a few which we are actually working on at the moment. But with this inspiration and motivation of Srimati Kavita Garu, we are definitely going to achieve our goals in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, it's a great honor and pleasure to introduce Dr. Shanta Sinha Garu. Ma'am.
Thank you very much. I must first of all thank the Telangana Jagruthi International Youth Leadership Program and Kavita for inviting me here today. I am sure that many of the girls who are sitting here, somewhere, someone in your family has fought against odds that enabled you come here. You know, there must be some aunt or some grandmother or mother or someone who sacrificed a lot and made it easy for us. We are working with girls where they are doing the fighting, they are doing the battling, they are struggling, and they want to come to schools. We are working with adolescent girls and boys who are fighting against odds. We're trying to see that they're not subject to abuse and violence. We're trying to see that they're not subject to gender discrimination and gender inequality, that they all come to schools and study there with much as equal to boys. There's just one more thing I would like to say, that in the society that we are working in, girls are not considered as youth. We are trying to define girls as youth. It's only boys who are youth, and I'm so glad in this conference girls and boys are being celebrated as youth, and I would like our society also to celebrate girls as youth.
Thank you, ma'am. And now I'd like to introduce Ms. Seema Malhotra, MP of the UK, and she most recently served as the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Ma'am.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be on such an amazing panel and talking about a topic that's also very close to my heart. I wanted to share a few things about my history and why this is so important to me. Thank you for mentioning I was the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and what that means is in the opposition party, I was the second most senior in our economics team. At the moment now, I'm on the select committee for exiting the EU, and those of you who follow British politics will know that Brexit keeps us very busy much of the time. But in the past, I have also served as a Shadow Home Office Minister when I was the first Shadow Minister for preventing violence against women and girls, which has been a very important topic in the UK as we look to how we tackle domestic violence and other issues, other gender equality issues in our own country. I want to say a couple of words about this debate and the topic, because women's leadership and sustainable development is very much both two separate guiding philosophies, but also very connected with each other, as I'm sure we'll be discussing further. Because in any nation that you see, we both have the challenges within our own countries, because we have absolute poverty as well within the UK, at least, I know on a different scale, but we have people who cannot afford food to eat, and we have the rise of what we call food banks in the United Kingdom, where people are given tokens to be able to go and get food for themselves and their families. And whilst we have within the Sustainable Development Goals the goal of gender equality, there's a question that is about women's role in achieving all of the other goals, as well as looking to how as a society and as a global community we look to get gender equality in every sphere for me, there's been a very important guiding kind of mission for my role in politics, and that has been to try and achieve equal economic progress for women and also the social progress for women, because far too much women are held behind in terms of economic power and social power. And the price that we pay is huge. There's a statistic that if we were to have women's equality within our economy, that would add about $28 trillion to global GDP. Now, imagine what that would do for household incomes, for the welfare of women, for children. Imagine what that would do for what you could get in taxation that could then contribute to public services and better education and healthcare. Imagine what that would do to spending power so that we can help grow our economy. So imagine all of those things that can come forward if you get the equality and the progress of women in our economy. But we're not going to get that without having stronger social progress and social power, with the message that women can achieve all that they might want to. So I'm sure that through our discussion we will be looking as well at the role that women and women's empowerment plays. And in that I just want to highlight a couple more final things, which is that politics plays a huge part in that, because women in politics change the conversation. They put new issues on the agenda. They bring different experience. And in doing that, women in positions of power help make a different kind of change happen. In the UK, we've seen this with the issues around women in the armed forces being put on the agenda. We've seen this also with women needing to be getting to the top of senior positions in our companies. We've got the gender pay gap reporting now in the UK. I worked for a year to increase diversity on public boards in all of our public boards, whether that's local school governors to the boards of our hospitals, because we recognize that diversity in decision making achieves better outcomes. So we've got to see women's progress in power, social power, political power, as drivers of progress for economic equality. And I hope that we'll be able to see the stories and experience of that shedding light and enlightening our conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And next is Mr. Andrew Fleming, Deputy High Commissioner of the UK, and a good friend and a strong proponent of the Telugu people, and also a strong, I would say, admirer of Hyderabad. So, Andrew?
Thank you. Sapaku Namaskaramu to the Telugu speakers, and that translates, for those of you that haven't already learnt, as something along the lines of "it's good to be among you." I was here for some part of yesterday, and I have to say that I was blown away by this conference, by the energy in the room, by the diversity of young people from all over the world that are here. And I really, first of all, just want to commend Kavita ma'am and everybody else that have played a part in putting this whole thing together. I am here in my capacity as the Deputy High Commissioner to Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. The UK have a total of 7 Deputy High Commissions among their 10 offices in India. This is our biggest network of diplomats anywhere in the world, more than in China, more than in the US, and I think that underlines how important our relationship in India is. And one of the many issues that I work on, I'm here to promote trade between the Telugu states and the UK. I'm here to follow the politics, but I'm also here to promote some of the British values that really matter. And one of those very much is around the whole women empowerment agenda. Last year, one of our key things to come out of the head of government's meeting, Commonwealth head of government's meeting, Jogam, was an agreement for working towards 12 years education for all. And the focus of that is very much towards education for girls. And education for girls is at the root of so much of this. So that's one area that we're working very hard on as the UK, and we're working with our Commonwealth partners. Of course, India is one. Many others are from nations in the Commonwealth, 53 nations in total. So that is one of the things. Our British MP has already said much of what I wanted to say, but I just wanted to make a brief observation. In the corporate world, study after study finds that companies with more women on boards get better financial results. And that's hardly a surprise, is it? Because those boards stand to be more attuned to the attitudes and behaviors of the whole population rather than just part of it. So, in Parliament and in ministries, a critical mass of women is equally needed for the perspectives of women to be well reflected in legislation, policy making and decision making, and even just to get issues on the national agenda as priorities. The international evidence suggests that when the numbers of women parliamentarians reach significant numbers, issues previously unaddressed become important, issues of importance to women, and not least those dealing with issues such as public health and addressing domestic violence and indeed all forms of violence. So these are some of the issues we know. The challenge is the figures out there show that in many cases women are chronically underrepresented. We have to understand that and we have to work out how to take that forward, which I think is another part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Next is Mr. John Dixon, President of the World Trade Development Group and founder of the World Trade Centers in Okinawa, Japan.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a really remarkable experience to be here. The energy in the room, the people I've met are just remarkable, and you're all working really hard to bring up the level of youth leadership in your countries, your communities, and I really applaud you. You've done a great job. I'd also like to point out besides Kavita and the leadership that's been presenting here, must be hundreds of volunteers working to make this program happen. It's remarkable. Let's give those volunteers a hand. Could you do that? They're working night and day because this is an awesome, seamless program. And then I wanted to let you know that Sri Anna Hazara's comments yesterday were fantastic, and I have followed his advice in advance. I got married, and I had children, and I thought that was a fantastic admonition from him. And I also married the Commonwealth. My wife is a British, hard-headed British woman who is still British and not an American citizen after 35 years living in the United States. And so when I was asked to be on this panel, I called her right away, and my two daughters, and to get input about what I could say. I wanted to give you a progress report from the United States. I have two daughters and three sons. The two daughters went to Ivy League schools. One is a alumnus of same school as Arpit, and the three sons didn't go to Ivy League schools. They liked engineering and went to other smaller programs that they wanted to do. The two daughters who went to Ivy League schools, the second one earns as much right now today as her three other brothers combined. And the older sister, yeah, let's hear it for that was Thea. Let's hear it for my daughter Thea. Her older sister makes 3 times the combined income of those 3 brothers. So it's pretty powerful, the women in leadership. And my daughter just kind of she asked me, what are you talking about when I asked her about women in leadership? Because she said women outperform, and they're more effective, they do everything better than the men do. So it's pretty mind-blowing, and that's been her experience. Also, that daughter has been to India, I think, 5 times since college for weddings of her classmates. And that's one more point I wanted to make. Those 2 daughters aren't working in the fields that they studied in school, so it's not the Ivy League education that was better than the other education. I think my son's got a better education. But what has made the difference is the partnerships, relationships that they built there, and the remarkable people. And I think my daughters do that much better than my sons. they kind of go through on their own, and where my daughters and my wife explained to me that men work competitively and women work collaboratively. And that in this culture today is a huge advantage in leadership if you're thinking this way. So as far as America, I'm more concerned, honestly, with the boys than girl empowerment, because we have actually a big gap growing there now. 60% of all the undergraduate students in the United States are women. So 54% of the PhD PhD graduates are women. So, and I think, 60% of undergraduate, if I said that, I mean, the future, the trajectory is very, very powerful. More and more women also in the government, in Congress and in the Senate. And by the way, a woman of Indian descent is now will be running for president, I'm pretty sure, from the U.S. Senate. And the House is led by a woman, the Speaker of the House, who is challenging a kind of unusual president that we have in the United States. So they're working very strong there. And again, it's a very different situation than in India, but it's looking very good. I mean, there's of course I'm not saying that there's no problem. So there's a lot to do, but the women in this room I've seen are just remarkable, powerful ladies. So honored to be here, and I applaud the fantastic effort and work that's been done by our members of Parliament and the leadership here. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So I'll start out with a question for all of you. So what in your view is women leadership? I think John briefly touched on it already. But what in your view is women in leadership, and why do you feel it is important? So I'll start with Preeti Garu.
Yeah, I think for generations together, women have always been, targeted, or, they've never had that equality. I think it's only from the 20th century that, this has been started to come in, that, gender equality is something, it's a human right, which we all have to fight for. It is when it's half of the population of the world are women, so why this inequality? We should be in par with men. So this gender equality, and then coming to India, I think in the last decade we have been doing exceptionally well, and I think we are in par with men. And especially when it comes to educational institutions, I think we have introduced about 2 decades ago the 33% reservation, and which now I'm proud to tell you that we don't even need reservations now. We're almost more than 50% in all the educational institutes are women. So this is the situation about India, but when it comes to globally, I think there are a lot of countries wherein active legislations, active laws have to be in place so that women get equality, especially into jobs, opportunities, making them economically confident, which not only improves their self-confidence but the self-esteem, and so that they can raise their children better, they can become better citizens in future.
Thank you. When you ask the question why women leadership, I would like to say why not, but I think, as Doctor just mentioned, we have been left out of any discussion, any decision-making processes, and that reinforces gender inequality. In fact, I think if women participate equally, there would be new networks. There's so many networks women have, and they've been left out of any kind of decision-making processes in the country. In fact, if women are part of decision-making processes in the country, I think they will add new meanings to every policy that is being made in the country. In fact, I would think they would give new meanings to peace and harmony, new meanings to social justice, new meanings to the word dignity, new meanings to the word freedom. In fact, we are defining all this in terms of existing patriarchy and a domination and a hierarchical system. Women leadership would add new meanings to what democracy is, what equality is, what peace is, what harmony is. And I think world will be certainly enriched and enhanced with women participating, and we are fighting for it. Nothing will be given in a platter to women. Nobody will be invited to make history. Women will fight, and of course, there are men who are feminists, who would like to be part of the process of gender equality. They would, in fact, give us full support to make the world better, and that cannot happen without women's leadership.
Thank you, ma'am. See, ma'am. The question. Oh, the question is for all. The same question for all of you. Very uncreative. So what is women leadership and why in your view it is important?
Women's leadership, you know, it's a funny thing that we should be talking about it really at all, because as you said, women are more than half the population. But I think what's so interesting and important is what change can come when we see women being almost allowed to be the leaders that they are. And whether, you know, we see women, you know, been leaders in our families for for all the time, you know, generations, and yet for some reason then as a society we stop seeing the importance of the leadership that women have and what role they really play when it comes to our workplaces or even in politics. Now, in politics, globally, there's about less than 25% of politicians are women. And that varies country by country as well. The UK is around 49th in the world in terms of the global league table of women in politics. But I think what's so important about women's leadership is the way a lot of studies show that women are different leaders, different sorts of leaders. When women lead, they tend to bring so much more of their lives into their work as well. A lot of research showing that when women are on the boards of companies, those companies do much better economically, not because of something intrinsic about the biology of women, but really because of the life that women lead, our multifaceted lives, and how women can think differently and often do think differently about who the customers are because they're thinking about the customer and what people want. How women think about the employees in the workplace and can be much more sensitive to maybe challenges and the feeling of maybe how you might be in that workplace. So encouraging people to do better in the workplace and having different employee policies. There's a great phrase as well, which is the customer is queen. The reason why that's important is because women drive 80% of consumer purchases. So if you were a company looking to increase your market share, develop better products, you could do so much better by talking to women. And it's those companies that have the women, therefore, who are helping, thinking about what do people want, how do people need it. They're bringing into the workplace and into companies the experience of being the person buying. So we underestimate the importance of women in leadership for what are many things in the mainstream. And this is why all that research that shows how much better off our nations would be if we encouraged and supported the development of women in leadership positions, found new pathways for women to come forward in what are very often male domains, because so much happens through male networks, men encouraging men to come forward, men recruiting men for the positions to replace them afterwards because they cannot imagine how can my organization run if there was a woman who was in charge, until they suddenly realize that maybe women might run it better. So, you know, this is also about challenging stereotypes. It's one reason why I just want to say this. I was so inspired by the panel that came before and by Purna and Babita. You know, I learned so much from their stories, and I'll just say this as well, is I grew up in West London. My parents were immigrants. My father was an engineer. He did, I think, pass his engineering exams. We can tell Gopichand. But he became a small businessman because what he did actually was he gave up much of his life and what his dreams were for his family, because life was so hard for immigrants in those times as well, and having stability for families was hard. And he chose to be the main carer for my grandmother, my Dadiji as well. We grew up in extended family, as I believe very strongly in. But what was important was how he treated us as his daughters as well. We were 4 girls and my brother, who's the youngest. And I was lucky, I think. My oldest sister was an engineer. And I just mentioned this story for a reason, which I'll just come back to. My second sister was a doctor. My third sister studied maths. And I think I was very lucky, because by the time it got to me, they didn't really mind what I did. They had the engineer, they had the doctor. And so I studied politics and philosophy, went on to have a career in business, and then became a politician. But what was interesting now, when I think about how our lives have changed, my sister lives in California, and she studied engineering at Cambridge. And she started off looking at working in wind technology and renewables. She's going back into that now to start to think about working. She works with racing cars, actually, around America. She designs racing car engines and performance tests them, works with the racers. But she's going back into looking at now electric vehicles. And I'm saying this because one of the lessons that we have about Sustainable Development Goals is how we can encourage, and as women in our organizations or our professions, encourage our organizations to work collectively towards those goals, because it's going to be companies, politicians, civil society leaders shifting their agendas to align with the global goals that are going to see us moving forward in terms of a world progressing against the outcomes we want to achieve. So I'm using my sister's example as a way in which you can use your skills for one thing, or you can use them for another. And now to use the skills you have towards achieving some of the other Sustainable Development Goals is how I can see women playing a greater role, because we will bring our experience and our priorities and our sense of commitment to those global goals into all that we do.
Well, there's not much left to say after that, but that's the advantage of being at this end of the line, I guess. I think I really answered the question in my opening comments when I talked about, Seem has reiterated the point about women in boardrooms, about the impact of women in politics. What is a woman leader? I mean, everybody who's grown up in a home probably knows that ultimately the leader in that home is by definition the woman. She has so many skills. She balances logistics, procurement. If she's working, her professional life, but still the family life, that has to come first. She works incredibly hard. I think there was some survey that suggested a woman works 4 hours more a day than a man at a conference I was at with you, and I was going to say, she's telling me at least, and I was going to say I thought that was actually quite conservative in terms of the in terms of the figure. So yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I think a very high proportion of women, if they have the opportunity, have the capacity within them to make brilliant leaders. They're resilient, resourceful, and remarkable. And I recommend that what needs to happen is that think tanks and researchers need to spend time to study the best practices and showcase how these women who are seen to be really good natural leaders, and there are many in this room even, what is it that makes them, and what we can do to bring that back and empower even more women. And I think it's also right in this panel to remember that, you know, so many women in India, and India is not an easy country to be a woman. For the average woman never gets a chance to come to an event like this, to set foot in a hotel conference center like this, to participate in this kind of conference. So many women lead a life that day to day is very different. If you can find ways to engage and empower those women, even within their communities, to broaden their lives, they have the opportunity to really transform their communities, to help their families out of poverty, and that is obviously key to achieving all of the SDGs.
It just occurred to me, I've done some work with Muhammad Yunus and the microcredit effort throughout the world, especially in the developing countries and where there's extreme poverty. And almost 100% of microcredit loans go only to women because women are dependable and they manage to repay those loans in a very repay them, period, when often with the men wouldn't do that, but they dominate the whole realm of the microcredit industry. And just one more, I think we all agree that women leadership is a leadership, and for sure it's more than 4 hours more a day, no question about that. And by the way, I'm very inspired to hear the word family come up many times in this panel, and because it doesn't come up often in the development spaces and conversations. And it should. It's not recognized or emphasized enough, but it's the real platform where we learn to love and where we learn to empathize and where we learn to connect to the broader community and the broader family. And just one story, another about my wife. Talking to her, I remembered when we come back from if we do a conference together, when my wife and I, we always split up and work, talk to as many people as we can. When we compare notes at the end of the day, I found out what this person and that person does. I find out what they do. She always found out who they were. My wife knew the people. I was just working on the externals with them. And if you're thinking leadership, understanding who a person is 100 times more powerful than knowing just what they do and the externals about them. So capacity there is remarkable. Thank you.
Great. So now we start with individual questions. We start with you, John. John, you addressed the International Young Leaders Assembly at the UN in 2015, and we wanted to understand how have the global youth needs and aspirations changed, if at all, and how would having a woman leader serve them better in realizing and achieving these aspirations?
That was at the UN, right?
Yeah, 2015, long time ago.
Yeah, okay. The International Young Leaders Assembly is a project I'm very proud of. Thinking about that, we build that whole program with interns, right out of, or in the university mostly. I would say of our interns, 85–90% are women. And of the delegates in the International Young Leaders Assembly, probably 60–65% are women from around the world. We've worked, there was one young lady that started in our very first one in 2013. She was from Paraguay, and she was the first Latina president of the Student Council in George Washington University. So she became an intern for a year, and then she was a part-time staff. After 3 years, she became the Minister of Youth and Sport for the country of Paraguay, the youngest minister in all of Latin America, and the first woman in that position ever in Paraguay. So we've seen firsthand evidence of the flowering and power of women young leaders. Also, the new Minister of Youth, or the Secretary General Special Envoy on Youth, is from Sri Lanka, Jayathma. The first one, Ahmed Al-Andawi, did a fantastic job, but Jayathma has twice the energy. He's traveling twice as far and having a much bigger impact even than the original. So we see women leaders coming up everywhere, and we're totally sold on the power, and we agree that in India we need a lot more access for those young leaders.
Great, thank you. So, we've just been told we have about 8 more minutes for us to wrap up. So I'll just request each of you to keep your answers a little bit succinct, slightly shorter. And the next question is for you, Andrew. So it was not too long ago that you were at the Young Thinkers Conference, and you expressed a lot of concern over the widening gender gap in terms of health, economics, and political empowerment across the world. And you said that the critical mass of women were needed in legislatures for actually having women-friendly policies. So what can we do here in the Telugu states? Let's start with that. What can we do here to begin and arriving at those critical masses?
Okay. Well, I think it's all very well that more women, the figures of more women being graduating from universities in the US, 60% or something, over 40. If I misheard you, I'm not sure. That's great, but it's what happens after you get your qualification. And I think, this is where we begin to still see problems. And if more women are going to rise to the ranks of leadership across all areas of economies, societies, and in politics, there is a wide range of structural factors that do need to be addressed. This is as relevant to women rising to be political leaders as it is to women rising to be leaders in major public, private, or non-governmental organizations. And despite much progress in many places, there are still many, many glass ceilings out there. Women in leadership positions globally really are still a rare commodity. And these glass ceilings have to be tackled head-on. They have to be broken. And there are many proven ways of breaking through them. Addressing the basic structural issues is a precondition of that. If you look at some of the statistics that are out there, 155 countries have at least one law which discriminates against women. 100 countries put restrictions on what women can and can't do. And women in 18 countries cannot even get a job without their husband's permission. So that's obviously things that have to be lobbied on, tackled, and tried to be changed. But even in places where things are going quite well for women, there are still real challenges for women to make that progress that men have been making. I mean, I can talk about my own department, the Foreign Office, and we have recognized recently that there are many, many of the top positions around the world where we've never had a woman in that post as an ambassador or a high commissioner. And there is a campaign, without being discriminatory, there is a campaign to really encourage women leaders to acquire the skills and be able to go for some of these top positions. Indeed, the country I was in most recently, Nigeria, has just got its first female deputy high commissioner after something like 27 men. And that's progress, and we have to champion her, and we have to use these champions and role models to then share and pass on to others within our organizations.
Great,
I'll stop because of time.
Thank you, Andrew. So now we get to the most exciting part, which is audience interaction. So we'll start by taking questions, and okay, very good. So we'll start with the left, and yeah. Can we have a mic there for them, please? Or you can come forward.
Hello. Hi, myself Vinay Kumar, and I came from Agra, Uttar Pradesh. I would like to ask, any one of you can answer it. So, there is a reservation in local governance for women. So like a sarpanch and all that. So I have seen in my area that they can be elected as a as a sarpanch, but they never uh, come out from the home. Their husband used to do all work like a sarpanch. So there is a reservation, there are seats, but and the problem is, the challenge is, when I met them and I asked them, the women, that why you don't come out, then they said, no, this is not our work. Actually, they have accepted the hierarchy and the pressure from the men's, and the men's are doing everything. So what is the purpose of this reservation, and how can we handle this challenge in the local governance level, where the challenges are hard still? So I want to ask, any one of you can answer.
See, women in leadership is not just about holding posts or, being in the boardrooms or, as rightly said, in the corporates. Women leadership has to begin from home, wherein they have to be involved in all the decision making, be it a family, be it a community, be it, any platform. So when the change starts from the family, only then they can become, they can hold these posts or probably become better representatives of politics or, the nation.
I might just add that what you had just described was true some 3 decades when it was introduced, but right now women sarpanches are asserting themselves. They are not listening to their husbands, they are not piggyback riding, they are making decisions. There are studies regarding that, and I think I should congratulate all those women who have fought and are doing very well as sarpanches and have taken up public issues. Because they're women, they've not stopped, they're talking about education, they're talking about health, they're talking about gender violence, and they're talking about very different issues than what male sarpanches did.
I want to thank you for asking the question, because I do think it's an important question, and one where it comes down to making a choice, and it's making a choice in the interests of not just the time now, but what change we want to see for the future. I'll feed back a couple of brief thoughts. The first is on experience that some people in India talked to me about, and that is where they had reservations and how that had made a change in some, particularly some rural areas of women coming forward. And the first generation of women coming through knew very little about how to be playing a role in administration, because no women had really come before them. But over time they learned, and the big change came with the next set of elections, or the next generation, because as those women started to be in those positions, others around them started to see what those positions were and what being part of an elected government was, local government. So it changed this attitude of women to start to think it could be me. And then the quality of the politicians coming through started to increase very dramatically, and then the improvement also in the local administration. But so that's one positive, to think beyond where things are now. But the second thing is how, even in a time when women are taking some of those positions, how men still want to hold on to the glory. So we have this in England as well, where many of the journalists are male, so they call their male friends. And for women to get into the media, even if women are actually doing more of the work, is much harder. So we have the battles to fight also in terms of making sure women have the visibility, because the visibility makes a difference. The confidence to say what you're doing and have the skills to communicate makes a difference. But also women in those positions are huge role models for women to come after. And as nations, we must be thinking as well, not just in terms of 1, 2, or 5 or 10 years, but 50 years and 100 years hence, and what world we want to build, because really, in truth, that's how long it's going to take.
Okay, so my name is Annie. I'm from Finland. And the question I have for you is that we notice that there's a need of action and policies to encourage women to join, for instance, government, but also join, for instance, STEM subjects in university. So my question is, do you think that quotas efficient ways of bringing more women to leadership positions. Yeah. So, do you think quotas can actually change something in this problem? Any speaker can answer, but preferably just one.
Can you just repeat your question, please?
Yeah, my question is if, because we know that we need action to fight this problem, do you think quotas are an efficient way of fighting this?
Reservations. Okay, quotas. Okay, got it. Thank you. Yep. So the question for all of you is that are quotas or reservations the right way to enable more women to be in the leadership positions or be a part of the bigger movement?
My one-word answer to that is yes.
Okay. It's a unanimous yes, but ma'am, if I may respectfully ask you. Yes, I was going to ask you, is it patronizing to have reservations?
Even this reservation is a result of a battle and not given just like that to please women. Let me tell you, there's still the war going on. We are still fighting and fighting and fighting, and it has not come.
Women have been suppressed for so many centuries. I think now to reach that equality, we definitely need reservations now. Probably in 2 decades' time, we wouldn't even need that. By merit itself, we'll be there, more than 50%.
The last question, so please ask wisely. We are all available?
Yeah.
Hello. This is Asma Sultana Shuchi from Bangladesh. According to Times of India, almost 50,000 Bangladeshi girls become victims for human trafficking in India in every year. So my question is, what steps are India taking for this, and how can we youth can help them, and how can we connect with you for advice or for help?
Yes, so I think Dr. Shanta Sinha would be the right person.
You know, this is a very complex issue, but let me tell you that it has to be tackled first at locally and then also at the national level and inter-border level. Locally, yes, it has to be tackled because everybody knows who the traffickers are. You know, it's no secret. It's and they're open. And the governments there, the panchayats there, will have to alert, and there has to be a large civil society movement against trafficking. While this happens at the local level and at the societal level, I think there has to be a lot more that has to be done by the government to see that there is due diligence and that there is criminalization of traffickers. There's a huge network of traffickers across borders with the police and with the local officials, and we'll have to, in fact, put pressure on them to see that girls are rehabilitated and sent back with a lot of facilities for rehabilitation. They're not able to listen.
They can't hear? Okay, so now the very dazzling panel, all of us will be available for you, all your questions, but off the stage, offline. So before we close, we are all available here, right here, we are all there. So we'll answer all your questions, including that person waving there. So on behalf of all of us, we'd like to thank the organizers and Kavita Garu for giving us a chance, and all the young people for being an enthusiastic audience. And we look forward to speaking to all of you off the stage. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, our panel members, for an insightful conversation. I'd like to invite our next panel on stage related to global models on innovation and leadership and youth development. Okay, we'll first have a group photo, and then I'd request the panel to come up on the stage, please. I'd like to request founding president, Mrs. Kavita, to join the panel on the stage for a photograph. So our next panel is a very young panel, and I'd like to start inviting our speakers, Ms. Pallavi Parikh, founder and CEO of Ungender. I request Pallavi to kindly join us on stage. A huge round of applause for Pallavi. I'd like to invite Mr. Ronald Segura, Social Innovation Officer, Omar Dengo Foundation, Costa Rica, to join us on stage, please. Huge round of applause for Ron. I'd like to invite Mr. Aditya Malkani, South Asia Head, Association of Commonwealth Universities, to join us on stage, please. Huge round of applause for Aditya. To moderate this panel, we have Ms. Victoria Elms. She's a research coordinator in a think tank that me and my partner Uday has started, Global Policy Insights. I'd like Victoria to please come on stage and moderate this panel. Huge round of applause for Victoria.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Victoria Elms, and I am a research coordinator at the think tank Global Policy Insights. I hope that everyone is looking forward to an engaging and fruitful discussion on the matters pertaining to young persons' development, and I'm very honoured to be joined by our distinguished panellists on the stage today. So, the topic of the panel this morning is global models of innovation and leadership in youth development, and I find it particularly important to address this through the global lens, not just because we are in a room filled with representation from over 100 countries, but because youth policy has been of increasing importance in the international sphere in recent years. At every level, from state to national to multinational, organisations are waking up to the fact that we've heard mentioned many times across these past 2 days that the world's population is incredibly young, and organisations must realise that innovations and provisions to nurture and stimulate young people in a sustainable way are incredibly important. So with this in mind, I put my first question to the panel. We are fortunate to have panellists from very diverse backgrounds here in both the professional and geographical sense. So I ask you to introduce yourself and your expertise and communicate to us what models in youth development have been successful in your areas. And I think we'll start from the follow. Okay, sure.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Victoria, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Aditya Malkani, and I'm the South Asia representative for a body called the Association of Commonwealth Universities. The ACU is the world's oldest international university network, established way back in 1913, and we have a very wide and diverse membership body, over 500 universities across 50 plus Commonwealth nations. Our largest number of members are here in India, with over 160 universities as part of the ACU membership in India alone. My role is in engaging proactively with our Indian members, which is very, very exciting because it involves a deep dive into Indian higher education, as well as gives me a number of opportunities to interact with students across the board. A part of my role is also in supporting our non-Indian members, build unique projects and partnerships in India, which is equally exciting. And these various responsibilities give me some great opportunities to observe youth innovation and leadership models. As the ACU, we have a number of programs that involve our students. And one example that I'd like to quote is our ACU summer school that takes place once every year, that brings together young leaders from across the Commonwealth to debate, discuss, and learn more about an important current issue, ranging from health to gender to media to business. And we find that as the ACU, that puts us in a very strategic position to actually provide a platform for youth leaders across the Commonwealth to come together, to pick each other's brains, to learn from each other, and to find and devise solutions for some of the world's grand challenges. We're great supporters of the UN's SDG Accord, and are firm believers in the power of youth, and particularly here in India, where we have over 500 million people under the age of 30. The importance and the contribution of the youth is absolutely vital to India's, the regions, as well as global development. So I think I'll pause here and hand over to one of my colleagues to introduce themselves and give a few opening remarks.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ronald Segura. I come from Costa Rica. I've been working for around 8 years now with different NGOs in my country, basically developing training and educational programs in areas such as climate change adaptation, sustainable agriculture, and soft skills. I want to talk a little bit about the Costa Rican experience. I think that my home country has been walking the Gandhian path towards sustainability for a while. In 1948, we decided to eliminate our army, which this represents, study says that this represents around 1% yearly GDP growth, and has allowed us to work in educational programs and towards sustainability. Globally, the country has been an advocate for peace and for sustainability, and the country works and believes in diplomatic solutions and support of international organizations as the way to achieve development. Unfortunately, I have to speak a little bit about issues that the region has. In the past month, hundreds of citizens of Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Mexico has been traveling and walking thousands of kilometers from their home countries to the U.S. border, fleeing very bad situations in their home countries. These people are not gang members. They are youth people, women and children that are seeking new opportunities. Unfortunately, these people have been displaced by regimes that do not care about the well-being of their people, and governments that have been historically supported by the U.S. Mr. Donald Trump gets scared of a few thousand people from these Central American countries. But let me tell you that in the past 6 months, Costa Rica has received around 40,000 Nicaraguan people that are fleeing also a very bad situation in their home country. And I bring this subject to the table because I think when democracies and public institutions fail, it's the young people that suffer the most.
I would like to now compliment the rest of the panel that is here. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pallavi Parekh. As mentioned earlier, I run this organization called Ungender, and with respect to youth development and especially with the context of making sure that individuals are empowered and individuals are part of a workforce which allows them to take care of themselves sustainable manner. Ungender has been focusing primarily on one single gender as of now and addressing the new genders that our society is now ready to accept as part of the larger workforce. And the basic or the fundamental questions that we have been addressing and finding answers to is why certain genders are not joining the workforce, at what age the deterrent starts happening, whether the causes or the reasons are coming from internally within the family, or the reasons exist in the education system, or the reasons exist in as part of an infrastructural problem. What are the concerns that prevents an individual belonging to any specific gender from stepping out of the house and accessing this empowerment that comes from financial inclusion as a larger part of the society. And while addressing these questions, of course, other aspects gets answered also, wherein the need for not just the basic education, but sometimes even cultural sensitivity gets answered. And that has been the journey so far. We will talk more about it going forward. In the past 9 years, we have also been looking at inculcating practical, skills, which mainly miss from the traditional aspects of the education through another project that I have been part of. Mainly looking at one single industry as a case in point, which is the legal industry, and what prevents people from, after even achieving a degree, and not being able to qualify for the roles that they actually aspire to be. And where does it lead that certain individual? So there's an economic cost to it, and there's an emotional cost that goes hand in hand with these things. And eventually, as part of a policy making and policy advisory role, we have also been able to see that there's a connection with the crime in the society when the education system and the job system fails to supply or fails to complement or bring that equilibrium, especially at the youth level. And irrespective of the correctional facilities that we have or the rehabilitation services that exist either in the legal system or outside the legal system, how the damage done at the educational level for the lack of it or for the improper structure of it contributes toward the increasing crime in the society as well. So that has been the work journey so far, and looking forward to dive into the discussion now.
Thank you, panelists. So, drawing upon the point that you made just there, it's been mentioned in the past that a fundamental element of any model of youth development is ensuring that there is sufficient access to and quality of education. I observed the breakout panel yesterday on good jobs and education, and one of the major issues that discussed there was the huge gap between the demand of the job market and the education students are actually receiving. This is creating an excess of well-educated individuals who are simply not equipped with the necessary bridging skills to support their employability. So how can we go about solving this issue?
So I think the point you've made is an extremely relevant one. The question you've posed is very, very relevant. I think it's going to be quite challenging, frankly, for us to make sure that we bridge this gap between education and employment and employability, particularly with the advent of technology, which is moving ahead so fast. We've already discussed that a number of jobs might get outdated over time. I think the only way forward, frankly, is for us to find ways of reskilling our young people, whether it's through our universities, whether it's through our community colleges, through our training centers, to make sure that young people are actually equipped with the tools and the thinking skills they need to take forward opportunities that present themselves in the years to come. So reskilling, I think, is critical, because while there is there's clearly a challenge coming at us through the advent of technology and jobs being lost through that, one could actually turn this into a huge opportunity to have more and more people enable themselves to work in developing new technologies and in actually turning this potential obstacle into a huge opportunity.
Thank you. I personally believe that we need to rethink educational models. I think the current system, a system that is based in, kind of a ladder. You go to primary school, then secondary school, then you go apply to university, and then you do your master's and your PhD. That system is leaving a lot of people behind. And definitely we need to change that paradigm and work towards a system that takes into account the abilities and the skills that people may have. I personally believe that working on soft skills such as leadership and teamwork is fundamental to being able to break that gap between education and unemployment.
I strongly believe that we need to relook at the whole machinery of what we call education. It's high time that we define or redefine the word education now. That do we actually mean it's to be a degree? Because it seems that right now no degree is good enough. You can end up having a PhD or double PhD, and at the end of the day, if you have not really acquired the skills at par with what is required out there, and which is ever changing because of the technology intervention, the roles are changing so rampantly that by the time you're done reaching that level, the job market or the position would have completely been replaced by some technological tool out there. That's one. And second, we also need to start giving importance to the word skill. When we are drafting our CVs and we are looking at a resume, and at that point in time, how many of us, of course, except for us and a lot of people sitting in the audience right now, but how many of us from the very young age are asking the question that what skills do you have? Degree is a question that keeps coming up, which degree you have, which college you're coming from, which university you're going to be. But the skills that are acquired or the skills that you're building on, it's a question that is not happening in a very active manner. What it will lead to eventually is that for skills you don't really need to go back to your education institution, because there is a alternative or parallel learning that you can create for yourself. We are living in the times of LinkedIn and Coursera and edX and all these platforms where acquiring additional or complementary knowledge plus skills is something that we don't really need to wait for the education system to reform itself. That may be a parallel change, of machinery that is happening. But until that is happening, we do have, and thanks to technology, we do have alternative methods to start building on.
Thank you. So, in a similar vein to the issue we've just discussed, so that was the industry skills deficit, but there's a further issue that is perhaps slightly harder to solve. So in 2016, a study by the International Commission on Financing Global Education Opportunity found that by 2030, over half of the world's young people will lack the basic skills needed for employment. And nearly 2 billion jobs will be at risk of becoming obsolete. So as technological advancements in areas like artificial intelligence continue to soar, how can we, as innovators of youth policy, keep up this rapid development?
I think we're going to have to use technology very, very cleverly and effectively. As they say, technology has to be employed to meet our needs, and we don't have to become servants to technology or extremely dependent on technology, which is what is happening to a large extent. Uh, as long as we can get educational institutions across the world to understand some of the challenges that reports like this are presenting, uh, the responsibility rests a great deal with education, whether it's schooling, whether it's higher education, where we have to change the way we design our courses, change the way we design our classes, and make sure that our students are actually learning 21st century skills, as you mentioned, um, learning skills that enable us to think on our feet, learning skills that enable us to meet with the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century. Uh, I also am a very strong believer actually in having industry involvement in designing curriculum, because it's all very well for academics to uh, to to teach based on theories and teach based on you know, concepts that have been handed down generation to generation. But the way the world is moving today with such great speed, I think it's important to get industry involved in designing courses. And I think that really is one of our better bets at making sure we overcome some of these challenges.
Yeah, I agree with your points. I think that in the future we will need to develop or be very intelligent in developing training programs and bringing training programs to young people, especially very young people, to create that spark so that people get involved in STEM programs and STEM education. I think we will definitely would have to focus on innovation and entrepreneurship at a very young level, so that we can have that spark in young people and get them involved in these kind of programs.
No, I absolutely agree with both my co-panels here. One more angle to be to look at it is, in considering from you know, the kind of work that we have been working on, is that somewhere we also need to relook at what exactly are the topmost skills that we are looking at. You know, what are the approved or the things which are in demand or in so-called fashionable in job market. Like, I'll just share and for the longest time, if you'll see in Indian context, either you have to be an engineer, or you have to be a doctor, or you have to be a chartered accountant, because these are safe and secure jobs, right? And we just had a panel, the previous panel, wherein we were talking about sports as a career, right? And this is something that 20 years ago will be very, even right now, a lot of people are struggling with it. So where does your interest lie? Right. Sometimes you may create the best of the, and I don't want to put the whole fault on the education system also, because that is also not correct to say that there is unemployment and there is, you know, the youth is not motivated because the fault lies in the education system and the way degrees are. Somewhere we are also not letting the youth to ask for themselves what is it that they would like to do. And maybe what they like to do can be easily converted into a career or a profession that they themselves will be able to chart out their way to, right? So it may not be something which is already a proven model. It's not a secure job. It's not something which makes you sit in a car and go to an office. But if it is something that lets you be self-sustainable, and either as an entrepreneur, more than self-sustainable, it allows you to create jobs for other people also. That is also okay. And that redefinition of what it means to be employed is somewhere that needs to go out to the youth of today's.
I also want to make another point, that is that I truly believe that we could focus in the future in more liberal arts, you know, enhancing culture and local craftsmanship could be a very good opportunity for the youth at some point. And I agree with what you're saying as well on entrepreneurship and innovation.
So, you mentioned the youth just then, and all of this term youth is very much a one-size-fits-all. It encompasses a huge, an incredibly diverse range of people, each of whom are facing their own unique challenges. So I wanted to ask the panel, what is a successful model for women and other groups, to not only be included in, but to be integral to achieving sustainable development? And is the Gandhian way a solution?
Would you like
to? I would love to say Gandhian way is the answer, but the problem is more complex than that, right? And if you have to just ask about one specific group here, because if you put everyone, like I said, we don't want to put the whole youth in one umbrella definition. I would also not want to put all the youth from the gender category also into one, because reason for people not having access to, forget quality education, but access to basic education stems deep into the societal construct that we have to look at. What works for the urban is very different from what works in the rurals, right? You may create schools, you may design and develop schools, you may have the best of the curriculum there, but if the transport is not there, if that point-to-point connectivity is not there, then what good those amazing schools are for? Right? And even in that one, I can easily divide that accessibility also based on gender, and that's where gender becomes the root of everything, because the youth and unemployment needs to not be looked at one single thing, but we need to actually further segment it based on, and depending on the cultural and the regional construct that we are talking about. Like in India, if I have to talk about it, religion and caste plays a huge role with respect to access to education, and here I'm talking about just basic education. Right? Gender plays another role. Minority constructs have their own elements that will affect. So it needs to be deconstructed, and that's why as much as I wish I could say Gandhian way is something that could solve, that's a lens that we should be using, but the problem goes much deeper than that.
Again, I think that a very important thing is to have educational opportunities and training programs that allow women and underserved communities to get involved and get empowered. They say that when you educate a woman, you educate the whole community. So I truly believe in that. I also think that fostering very strong institutions and networks definitely have a very good impact in this issue. Let me talk a little bit about the Costa Rican experience. So in 2002, the Congress approved a youth law, and this law established very well structured committees in the local, regional, and national levels for young people to participate and to also work yearly in developing youth policies. And I think this law has worked very well. For example, the current Costa Rican president is 38 years old, and the current president of the Congress of Costa Rica is a 36-year-old woman. And I think this has been possible because of these well-structured institutions, structured laws that allowed people and communities to get involved and to feel empowered.
So I couldn't agree more that when you educate a woman, you actually educate an entire community. I've had the personal opportunity and benefit of learning a lot from women who've been my mentors, and I've virtually had the opportunity of growing up around very strong women with very high impact views. I'm I think it's also safe to say that I'm quite the feminist because I'm very much in favor of women empowerment, of including women in education to a greater extent than women are today. In this country, we've had some outstanding women leaders, whether it's in the corporate world, whether it's as entrepreneurs, whether it's political leaders. But at the same time, you have issues with women and gender. So my view and I think my plea really is that whether it's government, whether it's society, whether it's the education system, wherever we see that there's unequal opportunities being given to women, we put our foot down, put up our hands, and make sure that we try and stop that from happening as much as we can in our own little way. Because while there's great importance in important policies and in rules and regulations, I think everyone at the personal level, at the family level, at the community level, has to make their own little difference.
Especially for education for women, it's and if we take the youth aspect away from it, it's so beautiful that how one aspect where you begin from. So we work very closely with respect to legal rights education. And after a lot of attempts to, for skill development and for, financial inclusion, even if that's not the main mandate that they have personally, when you start talking about violation of individual rights from a legal aspect, the conclusion comes that until and unless we are financially stable on or independent, the right for one's right, the fight for one's rights does not even end, or it can't even begin, because you need to be able to self-sustain. So from starting from education on their rights, on the laws that are relevant for them, we eventually ended up actually getting them enrolled into educational programs. So how education has also changed meaning for them, and how they themselves got had this buy-in on their own, was such a beautiful journey for us, because that for us, skill development was never the first thing that we wanted to start with. The focus was how do we get women to start asking questions that what are my rights? That's the knowledge that we were looking at. And we eventually ended up helping them actually become self-sustainable.
Thank you very much to the panelists. So I think now it's time for the interactive part of the session. So we'll be taking a couple of questions. Yes, this gentleman here that's waving in the middle. Please try to keep your questions brief, and do let us know which one of the panelists it's directed at.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been, if I have to connect the dots from the last panel, so it says that time again it has been proved that women are like amazing leaders given in any field. So, but my question is, but still we talk about the gender equality. So why? One side you say that women are like far superior to men, and one side you still like fight for their rights. So where are we heading towards? And this question would be Pallavi ma'am, you'd be the best person to answer this, I guess. So please enlighten me.
Thank you.
So think of a very fertile land and the best of the seeds that you can have, and just throw them on the land. Okay? On one section of the land, if you put a net or you put some pressure, and the other half of the land you don't put any pressure, you're not limiting it. Even if you have incorporated or you are giving the same kind of water, same kind of sunlight, everything, the growth of the suppressed side of the land is going to be limited. So when we say that women actually are the best, or have the capacity, or have the potential, we just mean that if you take away the limitation that comes from the social construct, social, so-called religious construct, however we want to interpret it, the growth is unlimited. We can grow as tall as, and I hate comparing it, but we can grow as tall as whatever the length, whatever the height it is that is out there, right? And the comparison is not even men. No one is comparing ourselves. We don't compare ourselves to men. The only time this argument or this word men comes into any of our statement is because we have to tell you that look how tall you can grow. That's the ultimate that is happening in the society right now, right? So when we talk about women and their empowerment and the importance that we should be given to it, it's only because right now the freedom of choice is not there. Someone else is making decisions for us. Either it's my father when I was a child, or it's my brother, or it's my husband, or now whoever is there in my life. Or later on, for some women, if you work in the field, you will realize even when they are like 70, 78, it's then their son who are making decisions for them, you know. And that's where, if you sit and you talk to this woman, you will realize they have talent, they had some skills, they could have done so many things, but no one ever went to them and asked them, what is it that you would like to do, you know? And if you could, then what is it that you want from us, you know? And those two questions don't really exist. And that's where the discussion keeps coming back to, you know, support the woman or take away the limitation. Don't even support. I would just say don't give anything, you know. But if you don't even give the limitation or the net that you're going to put there, don't do anything. Let her be. Just don't meddle. Let a woman be from a very young age.
This lady in the middle here.
Can you have question from backside as well?
Yeah.
Here. I have been to so many conferences, and people are talking about gender equality and woman empowerment. I guess until and unless a lady herself does not change her own mindset, nothing is going to change. So the thing is here, I have attended this conference, and in these 2 days conference, political problems are going to be discussed here, and educational. The most important question has not been raised here, which is climate changing. So my question is here is, what innovation has been done for in order to control the climate changing? As we can see, the global warming is going so fast, and human here needs for safety. So what has been done for that purpose? So if you can give a...
Thank you.
Okay, so see, somewhere we have to understand that climate change and its education, its sensitization is required on a lot of levels. Of course, people who are working in an expert manner in that field are working on the topmost level, and they're creating products and they're creating technology to address it, right? Some are correctional and some are preventive in nature. But if we have to talk about the innovation at grassroots level, there has been a lot of work which is happening with respect to sustainable living. This conversation has become very rampant and very common in the skill development sector also, wherein we want to upcycle or recycle a lot of things and we combine it with skill development. You do what you create things which are easily available without harming the environment around you. So that has become a conscious thought process and part of the conversation. If I take it to education at a basic level in schools, we do see a lot of conversations about introducing children to the topics of pollution, addressing or getting the children of today's to think about why they should not be contributing to the growing damaging environment that we have, arrived at. And other than that, I think that's the best that a school can do at this point in time. I remember when I was a child, no one was teaching me about it. No one did, and I think that's where we ended up wherever we have ended up as a global global economy. If we have to say that no one was talking to us very consciously about it, either in schools or in society, and wherever there was a conscious and active conversation on it, those are the countries that we see are less worried about it compared to the other ones. Like we are definitely more worried about it. But it's time to change. So it's starting at a young level with sensitization and small corrective things, and at a skill development level, it's happening with respect to how we can create more useful things from things which have been used earlier. And that is a good start, I would say. I don't know how much damage control it is going to do or how much it is going to fix things. But when it comes to climate, I think we have walked a little too far.
If I can just add to that point, I completely agree that the awareness of the need to hold some of these ill effects on the environment has increased significantly in recent years. And again, to my earlier point, where governments can do a lot of propaganda about climate change and can raise awareness about the ill effects of climate change and about how summers are getting hotter and winters are getting cooler. But at the end of the day, responsibility really rests with us as individuals. We have to make our own little difference, whether it's to the extent of using less plastic or making sure we don't cause indirect pollution to marine life. Responsibility rests with us, and I think it's at the individual level that we can make the biggest difference collectively.
Yeah, just two quick comments. I personally believe that quotas are very important, and this is basically on the previous subject. And I personally believe in them because I think those kind of things bring cultural change. And then you would not need quotas. But at the beginning, I definitely think they're necessary. And in terms of climate change and youth action, I think the subject has been dealt with on a very elite level, and we need to bring the subject to the grassroots. So organizations that are working to educate and train and bring information to local communities, to villages, are very important because at the end, those are the people that are going to be affected by climate change.
Something funny happened last month. Someone I know who works in the environment had conducted a conference, and I was not able to show up for it. So the next thing that I get to hear is, what will you do saving gender if there will be no clean air for them to breathe? So that automatically tells you that somewhere in our objectives also we have to see that what is critical, and even the critical aspects have their priority structure. And clean air, climate, clean water is something that we all need, even if we have to propagate gender equality or education, improving college education and anything of that sort. That stays the foundation.
So unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. I apologize to those who didn't get their questions.
No. Excuse me. Right. Yeah.
Hi, sir. I'm really sorry. We
just lost one question.
If it's brief.
Yeah, my question is to Ronald Segura.
Yes.
Yeah. Good afternoon to all. So just now, Ronald Segura has made a comment that Donald J. Trump is fearing for humanitarian crisis. So the caravans who reached southern border of US. So you are making a false statement. He is not fearing for any caravan or any refugees. So if you want to go through any other country, you have to go through in a legal way. So in illegal way, it's very dangerous for any person. So even southern border, they have a lot of trafficking. So child trafficking, sex trafficking, women, even human trafficking. Drugs are pouring like anything in US because of this southern border. So how will you claim that Donald J. Trump is feared? No, he never feared. He's such a strong guy. He's defending his nation. So how can you? So don't please make a false statements on the public stages. Please, Shegura, please learn something. Okay?
No, but thank you for your comment. I truly believe that the people that are traveling to the border, they are not gang members. They are communities that have been challenged by their own governments and by their own political and social situation to try and seek new opportunities. There has been a change in policies, and now, for example, Mexico, the Mexican government are giving them safe haven, and they want them to stay in Mexico to work over there. I don't think we need to think about refugees as bad persons. I think we need to work with them because they are in a very bad situation, and governments should work together to find a solution for this. And we can have a discussion later, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much to the panelists for a really engaging and insightful discussion, and thank you to the audience and the organizers for hosting us.
Thank you.
I would like to invite Mrs. Kavita to felicitate this very young and innovative panel with the Gandhian charkha and the shawl from Telangana Jagruthi's side. As discussed yesterday, the primary aim of this conference was to build common mental models on what are the problems we are facing and how we may resolve them. The answer to the question, how do we resolve them, lies in skill building among the youth with our various skills and competency building workshops. So I would request all the social leaders, entrepreneurs, all our delegates to first break for lunch and 2:30 go for this various entrepreneurship and skill building workshops that we have organized for you. I would request the speakers to return to this main hall at 2:30 after lunch because the Telangana Jagruthi India Youth Fellows will be presenting to you. I would also request all the delegates to come back to this main assembly hall after the workshops, as the Honorable Governor of Telangana will be here for the closing ceremony. I request everyone to be in this hall for the closing ceremony at 4:15 p.m., please.